This video is low-key a big deal, yeah? If you are a regular watcher of me, you know I love a good brown neutral eyeshadow palette. Give me some dirt colored eyeshadows and I'm gonna love it. So today I'm going to be sharing with you my current top 10 neutral eyeshadow palettes. I did one last year if you want to check that one out. All of those are still really great, but it's the end of the year. It's time to think about what I've been using and reaching for consistently over the last year. And in terms of neutral eyeshadows, these are all amazing and what I've been reaching for. It's a mixture of new and old eyeshadows. So these are in no particular order, just alphabetical of the brands, but all of these I stand by the quality of, and if you like neutral, brownish kind of eyeshadows, I think you're going to love this. So first let's get started with ABH. Now, okay, so the Sultry palette has been one of my all-time favorite neutral eyeshadows. It's a little bit cooler if you take away like this shade and this shade, and it also can give the prettiest bronze look. So what's so amazing about this is there's a huge range here from depths to finishes, and then also there's some warm options, some neutral options, and a couple of cool tone options as well. Now you cannot get this anymore, I believe, because what ABH did is they took this palette, which I imagine is one of their best sellers, and they made it a mini palette this year. So unfortunately you can't purchase the bigger palette, which is more my speed, but you can pick up this new Mini Sultry palette that they just launched a couple of months ago. And I do think the quality is just as good, and they did a good job of narrowing down the shades that were in the bigger palette in the smaller one. I've been saying this, I've said it a few times already, but the packaging is very underwhelming compared to what we had before. But again, here there's cooler options, neutral options, a few different finishes, and I love that they have a black in here because I use it as eyeliner. So to prove that even though this isn't as amazing as the bigger pan palette, you can still get a gorgeous neutral look with this. So I use this for today's eye. So what I did is I started off with this shade at the top right here, and I just blended it all over my crease and along my lower lash line. And then I took the darker chocolate brown. I love a good dark chocolate brown, and I used it in the outer corner of my crease, into my crease. I put a brown eyeliner on my lower lash line, and I blended the dark chocolate shade along my entire lower lash line as well. For the eyelid shade, I kept it pretty simple. I just went with this shade right here. It's like a mid-tone bronze, and I put it all over my eyelid to get a really effortless kind of smoky look by using that mid-tone shade all over my eyelid. And then I finished off by using the lightest shade as my inner corner highlight and my brow bone highlight. And then I used the black and I just stamped that across my lash line. No eyeliner necessary. I love that versatility of having that super dark shade that I'm able to use as my eyeliner. The quality in this is really amazing. The price is right. So I definitely recommend this if you're into these glam kind of neutral looks. This is a great one to pick up. And even though this is a newer item to me, Sultry just beat me up, but Sultry has been a favorite of mine for years now at this point. I don't know if I've been happy or sad about this. I'm gonna go with a little sad about this, but I've definitely gone a little bit lighter with my eyeshadow, especially on my day-to-day, and a lot more simple as well. I've been messing around with a lot of single shadows, one-and-done shadows, pencil shadows, things like that. So a lot of times I've just been reaching for a really simple matte palette, and this year I have found myself going back to the good old Charlotte Tilbury Super Nudes Easy Eye palette, and it really is an easy eye palette. It's tiny, not much larger than a credit card, and you're just getting a range of light to deep neutralish brown kind of shadows, and this couldn't be any more boring to my eye. You know, especially when I got this, I was like, when am I ever going to use this? I'm never going to use these shades. Come 2023, apparently I've been into these types of shades. I've been enjoying just grabbing this to put some base color down in my eyelid, and then I'll go into like a pot eyeshadow or something, or I just keep it really simple and clean with my eyes. Now this formula is quite unique. It's different than what you're going to find in her quads or her palettes, because this is like a silky kind of formula, definitely more of satin. So if you have a mature eyelid, you are going to love this formula. It doesn't produce much fallout because it has that satiny feel to it, and it's just a great range from this light beige shade all the way over to black. So it's a great essential palette, making it perfect for travel or just keeping at your desk in case you need any of these shades, because no matter what eye look you're doing, even if you're digging into a different palette, sometimes you just need a beige, sometimes you just need a taupe, sometimes you just need a black. This palette has come in handy, and I have been enjoying this formula a lot. So this is an oldie but a goodie. It's definitely resurfaced into use during this past year and has been one of my most used neutral palettes. Okay, I do have a more affordable option. I'm cheating because I'm giving you two options depending on the tones that you go for, but this particular palette was in my top 10 neutral eyeshadow palettes video for last year, but it truly is the best for price point and just having every shade that you need. This is the Colourpop Bare Necessities palette. I got a new one sent to me and I kicked the old one out so that I could have a newer, fresher formula. And I mean, again, this has every neutral shade that you can need. It even has kind of plummy tones. It has some warm tones, some really cool nude tones, some chocolatey, taupey tones. Just a really great mixture of any kind of neutral color you're going to need, as well as formulas. Now, I don't think the Colourpop formula is super competitive with my favorite formulas, but especially for the price point, it's really, really good. Just has the essential eyeshadows that you're going to need. So this is one of the best neutral palettes to begin and start off any eyeshadow collection because you have endless options. There has been so many times where I've been able to dupe very popular eyeshadow palettes with this palette in particular, one of which the super popular Makeup by Mario Ethereal palette, which I'll get into later because that's also in this video, but love this. Now here's my cheat, because this isn't counting as part of the 10, but Colourpop also has this Stone Cold Fox, so if you're more into super cool tone neutrals, gray tones really, then this is the one you're going to want to grab for. But I have the same exact sentiments as the Bare Necessities. This one is just a little bit, or a lot of it, more cool toned, just so you can see the differences here. But definitely pick up one of these if you're into neutral eyeshadows. They are the best. They're still the best for me. If I need any sort of tone of neutral, I'm digging into the Bare Necessities. Next one is also a repeat from last year, but it's still being used, it's still being loved. For me, it's an effortless taupey eye. I stopped buying Dior Quints, but this remains one of my all-time favorites. This is Soft Cashmere. There's no way I could replace this out of my routine. It's one of the best quality eyeshadows I have in my collection because the shades, like with this brown shade for example, you pretty much get multiple shades of brown with this because it blends out so easily, but it also builds up so easily. And that's something that I look for luxury shadows. How much range in depth does this shade have? Based on how you layer it, you get so much range with this. Beautiful satiny taupe shades, a pretty glittery-ish kind of shade, very glimmery, shimmery, if you will. Just a stunning formula and the most flattering, effortless, neutral eye. I've talked about this over the years on my channel. It is still one of my all-time favorite neutral palettes. And even though I haven't been picking up Dior shadows recently because they've been inconsistent, trust that the quality of this is spectacular. Okay, so this is one that I tried in the very beginning of the year. Love it. So this is the Dominque Cosmetics Essential Palette. Now mine had an accident. This is a black, which I feel like the black really completed the palette. So unfortunately that's missing, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this neutral palette is so amazing. I love this top row here of shimmers, and even though this is only a 10-pan palette, there is a big range of looks that you can get with this that are everyday friendly but also evening friendly. A lot more evening friendly with the black that I broke, but I really enjoy the quality of this, and I just feel like this was very thoughtfully put together. This curation of colors, it's very easy to create pretty neutral looks. You don't have to think too hard. And I will say this one got a little bit more heavy use in the first 6 months of the year. I kind of slowed down as I tried a little bit more palettes in the second half of the year, but it still is one of my favorites. Okay, so this one is probably the least, I guess you could say, neutral of the collection here, but I'm counting it because if you're a neutral lover, this is a good way to kind of step outside of your comfort zone without being too uncomfortable. So this is from an indie brand, Glaminatrix Cosmetics, who now I'm telling you comes out with some of my favorite eyeshadow palettes. Now, okay, the least neutral, the least brown here, but I had to add it in because it is one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes of the year, and you can get brown looks. So we're cheating and we're counting that as that, but you can get really pretty springy, like purpley-ish kind of looks and greenish looks as well. But this row in particular down here is quite neutral, and then there's neutral pops running throughout the palettes. If you have experience with indie quality shadows, you know that they're better than what you can find on the market. The mattes are buildable, they're really soft, they blend very easily, and the shimmers definitely steal the show when it comes to indie brands. You just aren't going to get anything as reflective with as much complexities within the shades in this single color. So indie brands do the shimmers the best, and I've been loving this for my more neutral wearable looks. So I did have to sneak in a Glaminatrix palette in here because for me, they might be the eyeshadow brand of the year for me. Every single palette that they've come out with, I have loved, and you can get a lot of pretty neutral looks. Funny enough, the name of the palette is Nearly Natural because it is like a natural neutral palette, but like nearly, because not really. You know what I mean? The next palette that I have is one that I just showed, but the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. I was so stoked when they relaunched this after it being sold out for a year a couple of months ago. So you still are able to get this. I just think Makeup by Mario came out with the most beautiful, luxurious formula. His previous palettes I always thought were fine. Like you absolutely could work with them, you could get pretty looks. There wasn't an issue with them. I just felt like the formula didn't stand out to me for what I've tried on the market. This formula stands out to me, so I'm really excited to see that this was relaunched, and it's the perfect nude palette. We have a couple of warm leaning shades, but there also is some neutral leaning shades here as well. A very luxury style form of glimmers here that you're mostly going to get on the luxury end of the market, Italian made kind of situation here. And the mattes, buildable, blendable, buttery, triple B's, everything you would want with a matte eyeshadow. And just the curation of colors is really stunning. Now, if you are balling on a budget and you're like, Morgan, she's kind of expensive, I was able to pretty much dupe this palette with the Bare Necessities palette. So if you check out my original review from a year ago at this point when this launched, I show you side by side some swatches compared to a couple different Colourpop palettes. But overall, like if you want to know the differences, yes, you can get color for color dupes in the Bare Necessities, but the quality of the Makeup by Mario is better, and Colourpop cannot replicate the shimmery shades in here. That finish, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, I have two Natasha Denona palettes because, let's face it, at this point, Natasha Denona is my favorite mainstream market brand, and she kills it with her neutral palette. She does. So we'll start off with a repetition here. This one, she's coming back for round two. I believe she was in last year's, and if she wasn't, I've talked about her enough where she might as well have been. So this is the Natasha Denona Glam palette. Now this one is a little bit more cool leaning, I would say, than the next one that you can probably guess I'm going to show. But yeah, there's a little bit more gray undertones in most of these shades, but you also have like a chocolatey brown kind of situation here. Just really my ideal selection of neutral shades that I feel comfortable in, I feel beautiful in. They give a glam appearance with the finish of the shimmering shades, especially the more gray toned ones. You can get neutral looks, you can get everyday looks. Sun's coming out. I mean, I've talked about this plenty. It's an older palette now at this point, but one that is very much still a favorite of mine. Honestly, if I could only recommend one Natasha Denona palette, the one that I've used the most in my entire life, it is this one. This is my favorite neutral palette, especially because I do tend to love more neutral tones here. So, had to put her in, but I am still loving the I Need a Nude from Natasha Denona as well. Let me compare the undertones here. They're quite different from one another. The I Need a Nude, I mean, it just looks more nude. Does it not? The shades are a little lighter, the tones are a little bit more different. I do think there's a lot more versatility with the Glam palette, so I have to choose one. There's just more depth differences. undertone differences, so you're able to get a little bit more looks. But that doesn't mean I haven't been actually obsessed with the I Need a Nude palette. It is probably, if not my number one, it's not my top 3 favorite eyeshadow palettes of the year, but I'm thinking right now it's probably number 1. Stay tuned for that. I will have an overall palette ranking for 2023 coming up, but I mean, I love this one too. So do you need to pick up both? Probably not, but Natasha Denona is my favorite brand, so for me, I would definitely encourage picking up both if you love the brand, but if you have any brain cells and you want to be smart, I prefer the Glam, but that does not mean I don't love the I Need a Nude, because this was my favorite eyeshadow palette of the year, pretty much, right? Amazing quality, amazing color story, pretty nude simple eyes, and I think that's the difference between the two, really. The Glam palette came out in a time where I feel like eyeshadow was a little bit more popular. We did a little bit more deeper eyes, a little bit more complex eyes, eye looks, I mean, and the I Need a Nude came out at a time where simple eye looks were in, so this is really great to get a simple crease color and eyelid color and to head out the door. Oh yeah, I'm honestly surprised that this palette has made the top 10, but truly ever since I've gotten it, I have left it by my desk because I use it all the time. It's just a very useful palette, kind of similar to the Charlotte Tilbury that I mentioned earlier. So this is the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 3 palette, and it's literally just another all matte palette. You definitely get more shades here compared to the Charlotte Tilbury. It also is a true matte formula. It's not that satiny formula, so it does give a little bit of a different effect on the eye. But man, sometimes you just need a dark brown. Sometimes you just need a black. I have been enjoying this palette so much. This white is one of the best whites I've ever used. This is amazing for creating dimension and shape to the eye. And again, with the more simple looks that I've been into this year, this has been fantastic. Now, one thing that I'm getting constant questions about is comparing it to an OG favorite of mine, the neutral mattes from Viseart. The Patrick Ta is a little bit more powdery, but they're very, very different. I would say there's a nostalgic factor to it as well, but I'm very, very loyal to my Viseart. I used this in my makeup kit when I did bridal. I think for me, this is a little bit less messy to use when I use it on clients, but for personal use, I have been enjoying the creaminess of the Patrick Ta. I think both are great formulas. I think the Viseart's a little bit more versatile because you do get more different undertones here, as you can see, and I think the formulas are, I don't want to say a little bit easier to work with, but they're definitely more of a classic eyeshadow formula. The Patrick Ta formula is definitely, it's weird to describe a formula as trendy, but the Patrick Ta formula is really trendy in that it's so buttery, it's so creamy. Viseart has a drier formula, which is a little bit less messy and a little bit more versatile in the level of depth you can get within one shade depending on how much you layer it up. So old school formula is Viseart, new popular formula is Patrick Ta. Those are the differences. I love both, but in terms of what I've used more personally this year, it has been the Patrick Ta. So that's why Patrick Ta is making the list. And boom, there we have it. Those are my top 10 neutral eyeshadow palettes for 2023. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you have found a new neutral palette that you want to test out. Make sure you check out last year's if you want a few more suggestions, because there's so many good neutral palettes out there. It was hard for me to narrow this down to 10, so I tried to think this year's as more of my top 10 neutral palette for this year, but I have so many all-time favorites, like Natasha Denona Biba. I had a hard time not putting that in this video. So there's a lot more out there, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Share your favorite neutral palette down below. I would love to hear it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye guys, have a good one.